Hi there, my name is Naomi Nygaard and I'm an internal family systems therapist that specialises in the areas of addictions, compulsions and food challenges. And I really welcome you to this introductory video for the Freedom Steps. The Freedom Steps is a process of uncovering, unburdening and connecting with our spiritual centers, which are always there and are always untouched, undamaged, no matter what we've been through in our lives. And it's the healing medicine for any addiction or compulsion that you may be struggling with right now. So I imagine that you're watching this video because there's something that you do to help you numb out, to help you relax, to help you escape from worries, to help you enjoy. And yet that thing is causing difficulties because you're wishing that you weren't doing it. You're seeing perhaps that it impacts your life, perhaps it impacts your health, perhaps it impacts your focus to be able to do what you wish you could do, experience what you'd like to experience in this life. And there can be such a wide spectrum of that. It could be that what you're up against feels really serious and has been concerning other people too. Or it could be that it's just like a niggle, like a concern inside yourself, something that you wish that you could be free of. The good news is that this process of the Freedom Steps applies to any compulsion or addiction that we might have. And I'm going to illustrate a few points using some slides in this presentation. Take your time with this presentation, as with any presentations that I'll be sending you. Really allow yourself to take in and digest the material. There's no need to rush through this process. And I'm going to be repeating that because I know sometimes we can get into the tendency of thinking that we need to digest it all, process it all really quickly. But actually, let's respect our pace along this journey. And with that being said, I'm going to go right over and share my slides with you. So, your Freedom Steps, integrating IFS into a 12-step process for long-lasting recovery from addictions, from addictive and compulsive cycles. So why am I doing this? Why am I passionate about this? Why have I created this new thing called the Freedom Steps, which is an integration of internal family systems and the 12-step process? It's because I'm passionate about both of these vehicles for transformation and change. I myself experienced a very life-changing, life-saving journey of recovery through the 12 steps. I struggled with various different compulsions, addictions. One of them was to food, either eating too much or restricting what I ate and becoming addicted to being a certain weight. I struggled with romantic relationships. I would fantasize about the different people that I thought could end up being an intimate relationship for me. And actually the fantasy itself prevented me from engaging intimately with people in my life and romantic potentials in my life. I struggled around work and money. I struggled to have my creativity be shared in the world. And all of those different areas of my life are things that I've received a lot of support, a lot of guidance, and a lot of transformation through 12-step fellowships. Not without me investing a lot of time, a lot of energy, but with very, very positive, good results. Someone once said to me that when she talks about her investment of time into 12-step recovery, she said the wages are high. And it's certainly been that way for me. So I feel very passionate that this is a potential amazing way to help transform when we have addictions and compulsions. That being said, I was connected to internal family systems at a very early stage of my recovery in my first fellowship, which was Overeaters Anonymous. And so I had the benefit of learning about parts parts of myself and learning about what's sometimes referred to as higher power in 12-step recovery through the lens of internal family systems, which I must say was a very gentle, very loving and compassionate lens. And so I could combine them in my own recovery and weave those two modalities together from a very early stage. And I must say, I'm so very grateful for this. Another thing I wove into my recovery was what I now call embodied or somatic mindfulness, a capacity to be able to live my recovery out through my body. Because my recovery is not happening in my thoughts or in my mind, it's actually happening in my whole self. And parts of me can actually get super involved in the analysing or the theoretical or the intellectual part of my recovery. Even when they grab a pen and do a load of journaling, there can still sometimes for me be a way in which a part of me wants to keep it up here, wants to keep it at the level of thoughts and mind, rather than taking it down into the feelings and the emotions of my body. So that's another thing that I weave into this process of the freedom steps. I bring in and I introduce in and I welcome in my own body, and I welcome you to welcome in your own body. I welcome you to include the sensations, the feelings that you have in response to some of the questions that I'll be asking you, and include it in a way that allows for it. Try not to push away the physical, the body. It's so relevant, it gives us clues. Our bodies lead the way in some ways. They have wisdom that our conscious minds don't have connection to. So let's go right in to the first practice. I'd like you to start with a meditative inquiry, and I'm going to go ahead in this video and share a little bit more theory, share some didactics. But I'd love you to engage first and foremost with some things that might be up for you right now. You're embarking on something, the freedom steps, which may already have some associations for you, some history for you. Maybe you've been to a 12-step meeting. Maybe you've even been in a 12-step fellowship. Maybe you've worked through the 12 steps yourself already. And maybe you know something about internal family systems. Maybe you don't. Maybe you've had a therapist in that area. In both of these areas, you may already have history. You may already have ideas, preconceptions, notions based on your own experience or on ideas from things that you've heard of other people. And it's really important to be aware of those at this stage so that you can include those into how you prepare for this experience of the freedom steps. So I invite you to perhaps grab a pen if journaling is something that you find useful, or perhaps just sit quietly and allow yourself to engage in this meditative inquiry. You may need to stop the video, or you may wish to watch through this video and then come back to this and do it right at the end. So here goes. I'm going to talk you through this. What parts of you come up when you hear the words 12-step? So be with any reactions you have. Remember, including your body, these are coming from parts of you. So whenever we have a reaction, it's coming from a part of us. There's something about a reactivity that means that a part of us feels it needs to step in, share its story, and tell us what it knows, tell us what it feels. And it's time to slow down and really process that, really be aware of what that part is saying to you. And these questions might help. So first of all, can you be with these parts that react? Can you actually be curious about them? Can you let them know that you're there? And see, do they notice you? Do you notice if they notice you? And do they feel safe embarking on this process? So if you've had no experience of thinking about yourself as a cluster or a multitude of different parts, the way we are guided to do in internal family systems method, then this might be quite new for you. So take your time with this. How do you know if it's coming from a part of you? Well, like I said, if it comes with a reactivity, with attention, with some kind of idea, a thought that pops into your mind, then it's pretty likely that it is coming from a part of you. And if we are in a meditative and inquiring space, It's likely that we're in a safe space, a still space, a focused space, and then we can start to bring awareness to those different reactions. And that's really it. That is you. You are the awareness. You are the witnessing one. So that's as far as it goes, really. But to really get a bit more subtle with it, we can go a step further with the question, can you let them know that you're there? And do they notice? Do you notice if they notice you? So sometimes with that moment of realizing, wow, that reaction, that was a part. In that moment, we can also make a connection with that part. We can let them know that we're there. And the part itself can even show us whether it knows we're there. Remember, we're the witnesser, we're the awareness. So also we might get a sense of whether parts feel safe of engaging with this process. It may be that if you've experienced difficulties or challenges with either 12-step or internal family systems, that they don't feel safe. And then they can share their stories with you. Perhaps at this stage, they can actually recount something that happened, a way in which trust got broken, a way in which they felt that they picked up baggage in one of these areas. And it's really important to hear their stories now. Equally, what parts come up for you when you hear the words addict or addiction? Be with any reactions you have. It may be that you feel that addiction doesn't apply to you, the word addiction, and that's totally fine. Listen to the parts of you that believe that. Listen to things that they've heard about addiction. See if sometimes I meet parts that don't really want to be associated with addiction. They have specific ideas about what someone that is addicted to something might mean. And maybe for you, this is a bit more subtle. So really listen to any concerns they might have about that word, any baggage or burdens that they might be carrying. Again, can you be with these parts? Can you let them know that you're here and that you're doing this process alongside them? Even reassure them. See if they feel safe embarking on this process. They may have reasons why they don't, or they may be maybe that you find yourself completely open to this. And again, see if parts of you have stories connected with the word addiction, connected with an addictive or recovery process. And really listen at this stage. Like I said, it might be worth taking a journal, a pen, or it might be more helpful to just be in meditation, just be sitting in a quiet place and listening to your parts from within. I'm going to go ahead and share a little bit more about my passion, my mission, which is because I love so much the 12 steps and internal family systems. I realized that actually together, combined, these two methods of transformation can create what I think is a holistic package of recovery for anyone. No matter what we've been through, no matter how long we might have been struggling with this addiction, I truly believe that this combination of transformative processes can really allow parts of us to relax that may never have had the experience of relaxation in our conscious memory. For me, recovery is best when it's sustainable. So this isn't about having like a quick relief and then going back to patterns that we experienced once. It's really potent when we can experience a change that's irreversible, really. That's why we want to invest our time, right? We don't want to just flip right back into patterns of behavior. And of course, for many of us, those patterns of behavior may well be tendencies that we have, and we may need to be careful and experience a prioritizing of our self-care in a way that supports us going forward. So that being said, let's have a look at what I think are the elements of a sustainable recovery. So when we talk about parts in internal family systems, we're talking about the different multiple personalities that I believe that we're all made up of. And it's no good to having a recovery process that some parts of us feel on board with and other parts feel reluctant about, or they don't want to engage in it. It could be that a part of you really wants you to make this change and would prefer it if you didn't do the Netflix or the porn or the ice cream or whatever it is that's up for you. because it wants you to look good and be well and be healthy and be connected and progress and focus and whatever that is. So that part, it may be really willing to have you engage in this process of the freedom steps. It may even be that that part of you is the one that decided to enroll for this course in the first place. But see if all parts of you want to be here doing this. See if the part that actually eats the ice cream or drinks the wine or smokes the hashish or whatever it is, see if that part is okay with being here. Because really, in order to have a recovery that's sustainable, I believe all parts of us need to be on board with it. So don't worry too much about finding out the answer to whether this recovery process might be accessible to all of your parts at this stage. But really know that this process is about welcoming all parts in. And that really does mean all. I'm going to underline that a couple of times and put it in bold and italics. Because if there really is any part that is struggling and feeling left behind or feeling excluded or exiled from this process, then it will jeopardize the whole process, because no part likes to be overridden. And that's why the previous meditative inquiry can be very helpful for just touching on what blocks might be present for you right now, and those blocks, of course, coming from parts of us that perhaps don't feel safe. So it's good to always be aware of including any resistance to this process and take it seriously. Give it the space and time it needs, not because you want to try and change it or make it go away or push it or rush it or anything, but just because I always find that slow is fast. If we really take time to notice and include our parts, then actually we find that we can transform more quickly perhaps than we would have thought. So the next one is that the process, I believe, needs to be one of unburdening. So oftentimes when we experience addictions and compulsions that we want to be free from, there's a certain heaviness about us. Certain of our parts hold a certain burden of fear or responsibility, or a sense that they need to work extra hard and sometimes in extreme ways to keep us safe. So if recovery is going to be sustainable, I believe that actually lightening the load is an important part of that. And 12-step recovery really has clocked that very well, of course. It's mentioned that we can carry things, particularly perhaps in step 4, when we go through an inventory and look at our past. That means that we're prevented from experiencing this inner resource, which is self-energy. And in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is something I'm going to be referring to again, it describes this as being blocked from the sunlight of the spirit. And so when we are blocked, when we are burdened by certain things that prevent us from connecting with that part of ourselves, that sunlight in ourselves, then it's difficult to find any kind of sustainable change. And what we want is sustainability. So any kind of process of recovery, I believe, needs to be one of unburdening. And there are different ways of doing that. I'll be speaking more about that later. And finally, this self-leadership, it's something that I'm going to be referring to again. When we are in 12-step recovery, we might talk about higher power. We might even use the word God. That word might work for your parts, it might not. And when we're more in the internal family systems paradigm, we're talking more about self in as much as that's us. So our true self really is this higher power, this God, I guess, or this creative intelligence, this spirit of the universe, different ways that it's been referred to in the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book and in different spiritual literature across the board. But in IFS, it's described as self, and it contains the qualities that we need to be able to live a happy, peaceful life. And I believe that to make sustainable recovery, our parts, our protectors, need to serve us in making decisions in our life that create some kind of middle way. And the middle way is something that gets talked about in Buddhism a lot. It's basically finding a way where we're not in extreme parts. We're not coming from parts of us that feel that they have to protect us through an addiction or a compulsion, or protect us through restriction of behaviors, or through criticism, or bullying us in any way. Even judging us can be seen as a part. So a middle way is somewhere where we're not relying on parts to get extreme with us in order to live our lives. In 12-step recovery, it's called a bridge to normal living. It's a way where we can step forward in our lives, make decisions from a place of self, from ourselves. And as our recovery gets more subtle, as we keep developing and maturing in our recovery, that feels much more effortless. We might not even know that our protectors are helping us in that way. Those decisions might flow. It might be that we're more connected to intuition and we know what's right for us. At the beginning, it may be a bit more thought through. It may be that we need more support to make decisions in certain areas. Of course, we're all always going to need support in our lives. And yet this business of finding a middle way, it's really a solitary process in some ways. It's a unique process, and that's because we're all so uniquely different in how it's right for us to live our lives. So I'm going to stop the share right now, and I'm going to come back to the meditative inquiry. So I invite you to take some time with this inquiry and really see what it feels like to connect with your parts. Remember, if it doesn't feel easy, if it feels like you're not quite sure what the suggestion is, feel free to reach out to me. It's a subtle paradigm shift when we start to connect with our parts, especially when parts of us may have felt like us. And I know that they do feel like they are us, and yet when there's a reaction like tension or a feeling of not being so sure, these reactions do come from parts of us. And in order to start to prepare for this process in a way that's going to be most beneficial to you, it can be really worth slowing this down at this stage and taking the time to really know what feels safe for every single part of you, and welcoming any sense that this might be tricky, or that it might not work for you, or it's a bit unknown, or you're not sure about the 12 steps, or you're not sure about internal family systems. So reach out to me if you like, by email or by any app of your choice. And I encourage you to take some time now to do the meditative inquiry. I look forward to seeing you soon.